Amazing. So we've just had this gorgeous pre-chatter, and hi Hella, welcome.
Hi,
Welcome
as we
after,
do.
yeah,
The
welcome after
conversation
like
begins before we hit record.
totally. So half an hour later, hi, welcome.
I'm
Um,
so excited.
Me too. And thank you so much for joining me here today to share on German New Medicine, Germanic healing knowledge, and breath work. This is like a topic obviously very hot on my heart. And I obviously undertook the Facilitator program with you guys last year for breathwork facilitation, which was incredible. And my intention going into that was to integrate it with my knowledge of German New Medicine to better serve our community and clients. And I have to admit that when you guys mentioned GNM in the course, in the training, I literally, listen, my body inside did this little fangirl dance. And I'm pretty sure this weird squeaky noise came out of my mouth.
Oh,
Because I
that's
was,
when you know that you're in love with what you do.
yes, I was just so pumped. I was like, oh my God, these guys know about this. And so, yeah, that
Alignment, right?
alignment, and it really lit something within me. So I feel like this is a beautiful coming around of that moment where I get to sit here with you today and share this with our communities. So with that, do you want to jump on in and just give a little intro on yourself? Let us know how you came to breathwork, what breathwork is, and then I'll do the same for GNM so that we have context to this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I came across breathwork initially about 8 years ago. And I was at that point a life coach. I was doing energy medicine and I was basically personal development obsessed. So any workshop, seminar that I could get into, I was obsessed into it, going, learning, soaking up everything that I could, both for myself and then also to bring into my work with clients. And when I found breathwork, I really did think that I knew what there was available to work on yourself. I was like, okay, I've got the mindset tools, I've got the affirmations, I've got the reframes. I know how to catch a belief system and address whether it's serving me or not. I know how to meditate, I know how to do yoga. I know that I can go to the jungle if I want to and do ayahuasca. And I thought that breath work would be a tool to take my meditation practice perhaps a little bit deeper. Like maybe if I know some breathing techniques, I'll be able to relax more. I'll be able to apply that to make it all a bit more fancy and support my physiology in some way. Little did I know that breathing is one of the most misunderstood and untapped resources that we actually have available as human beings. So the first experience that I had, it was a workshop with a whole group of people in Bali. And after we got taught the techniques, we got into a practice. And within about 10 or 15 minutes, I felt like I was high, basically. I felt like I was in the jungle on the ayahuasca, taking myself on a journey. And it was really emotional. It was full of clarity and insights. I was able to see things about my life and my internal patterning from a very different perspective very quickly. So, what I think of it now as is by modifying the breath, we're also able to modify our brain waves. We go into what's called a non ordinary state of consciousness. I didn't know that at the time, but I was experiencing it firsthand. And so, when we're in a non ordinary state of consciousness, we can perceive things in a different way.
Mm.
And it's a way to bypass the analytical thinking mind to I consider it to get to the root often of what's actually going on, what's actually driving our behavior, what we're actually believing about our lived experience, and assess if it's true or not. And, there's infinite choices that are available within that space. And sometimes it's as simple as needing to acknowledge how we truly feel and allow ourselves to process it and release it, like releasing the emotions, whether it's crying or laughing or moving it through the body in some type of way. So after that first experience, I was obsessed. I was there with my partner, Lucas, Mac, and we both got up, I remember, after about an hour of doing the breath work, and we looked at each other and we were like, what was that? We have to study breathwork. And so 1 year later, we went in and we did a full-on training. And in the meantime, we were just soaking up everything that we could learn about the breath and doing our own practices and so on. Fast forward to now, we have traveled all over the world, served tens of thousands of people. We have a company called OWAKEN Breathwork. And as you mentioned, we also train other facilitators. So I am incredibly passionate about breath work, and I believe that mindset work is important. Working on your thoughts, the things that you believe about yourself and about life, all of that is really valuable, and there's a place for it. I also think there's a place for things like Western medicine and looking at what you eat and your daily habits, the way that you spend your time. All of these practical things have their role. And the breath and its relationship to our body and our patterns of storing energy and information based on what we live through is something that I think more people need to know about, because it could create the breakthroughs that those other means of working on wellness optimization aren't actually getting to. So that was the case for me. What I can say in summary is I was working really, really hard on mindset work to kind of band-aid over the deep down true feelings that I was having about myself, like not feeling enough, feeling unworthy, afraid, feeling like I needed to coach myself day in and day out just to get past this kind of internal enemy that I felt like I lived with. And I lacked compassion for myself. And by going in with the breath, I have felt my relationship to myself really deepen and transform. And, you know, it might sound a little cliche, but it's like creating the truest form of intimacy with yourself, where you have a deep, quality, loyal relationship with yourself that has begun through taking the time to actually get beneath the surface. You know, so many of us, again, like this is an overlooked area. We breathe in a shallow way, and we think and we operate and we relate to ourselves in a shallow way too. And by deepening the breath, we can also deepen that sense of intimacy. And from there, like light bulb upon light bulb moment, understanding, oh, wow, this is why I've been doing all of these things. This is why I have turned out the way I have. This is why I chose to prioritize that thing. And here I was thinking that it was because I just wanted to, but actually it's related to this thing that happened in childhood that I was totally programmed to do. And I mean, people call it like therapy on steroids. I love therapy. I think therapy, again, is valuable, but it's a different way, and it can be rapid and absolutely profound.
Mm. So just a little bit of juice there. Yeah, and I would have to say that my experience with it has been very similar, and you've described it in such a beautiful way there. It is like, for me, it's like the ultimate somatic pathway into so many different layers of ourselves, and not only in cathartic ways, but also you know, I found that such joy and creation can come from it as well. Like it's not only about going into the depths of us, but it's also about future projection, about joy, about creation, can be used for so many different things, which
Absolutely.
obviously you guys have proven, you know, in your mission and your business and where you've come to as well.
Yeah, I think that's also a really important piece of what we're doing as a community, including what you're doing, is giving people different ways of thinking about and relating to inner work. And that includes working with trauma. I mean, trauma can sound scary and it can sound heavy, rightly so, because it can be. And there are times when working on healing trauma can actually feel quite playful and liberating. And it's not through the heavy reliving it, rehashing it necessarily that we need to, we don't necessarily need to go through that to get to the place of completion. Sometimes it can be without even thinking about it at all, like just really allowing the body to discharge energy and shake it out and breathe and move that tension that's been held for so damn long without even having to think about or revisit those memories at all. Sometimes it comes through giving ourselves permission to feel joy and play and pleasure. And this has been fascinating, I think, over the years to witness how many of us actually don't feel safe to feel good. We don't feel safe to take up space. We don't feel safe to feel sexy or to experience pleasure or to have abundance. And so huge, huge discovery there around humanity and our patterns, how our nervous systems process experiences and respond to life. And by going into the operating system in a way, we can teach ourselves to feel safe with more of the things that we want.
Yes, I love it. We can teach ourselves to feel safe with more of the things we want. Oh, so good. And it's really funny. So actually I think it was the second breath work I ever did was with you and Lucas when you came here in Perth a couple of years ago. And that was like the polar opposite of my first journey. So my first journey was extremely, deep and trippy and like really intense. And it took me a while to come back from that experience, actually. And then the journey that I had with you guys in the group live was I laughed the entire way through that whole journey. I pissed myself laughing, simultaneously crying, but I literally laughed the whole journey. And it was just, I love that. You just never know what you're going to get. And it does access so many different parts of us. And it doesn't necessarily always make sense, but there is a feeling that comes with it, that there is just this knowing that something has processed, shifted, done exactly what it needs to. And if we can really lean into that feeling and trust that feeling and process, then there's, profound benefits to be experienced from the whole journey.
Absolutely. That's made me just think now of one of my favorite things with breathwork is seeing how it's almost like the two sides of a coin, and then the edge where they intersect, and how we can be crying and experiencing what looks like deep grief, sadness, pain, but then within seconds it can kind of merge and transform into the deepest love and bliss and gratitude, and recognizing the connection between these emotions that we often fear or avoid versus the ones that we feel familiar with or comfortable with, and just being able to expand the capacity to be with it all and recognize that interconnectedness. Like, in order to love deeply, we are opening ourselves up to be attached to something and to be vulnerable to the loss of it, and therefore exposing ourselves to the potential of grief and deep pain. But without exposing ourselves to it, we also miss out on that love. So it's life is just trippy like that, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I describe that like the pendulum, and I do think that breathwork gives us invites us and gives us the opportunity to access that full range of the human emotional spectrum. And I describe it like a pendulum. So if we're only experience, like giving ourselves this much room to experience the painful side of things, then we can only swing this much into joy and the other side of the emotional range, right? But when we swing right out and we open ourselves up and we give ourselves permission to feel the full depth of the pendulum, then we're also going to experience the full depth of the pendulum the other way. That's kind of how I explain that emotional range. And I really feel that breathwork gives us an opportunity to explore that full range in a very safe and held way when it's done, with intention and with facilitators that know all the good stuff and know how to hold us within that experience.
Which is so essential. And I'm curious, I'm just going to turn it back on you for a second because this is so juicy. And I think more people need to understand the way that it all connects together between breathwork and everything that you know with German new medicine or Germanic healing knowledge. What do you notice in your practice with that pendulum swing and how that capacity to be with a variety of emotions or not shows up in people manifesting, let's say, different symptoms?
Really interesting question. The first thing that comes to mind is that definitely from a GNM point of view, suppression is definitely not going to be helpful. So I guess the way that I work is that I always feel like it's important for someone to feel something fully before we move forward into resolving it. This is something I'm really, really strong and I guess strict about in my practices, because I do find that in this realm, this can be missed sometimes. Sometimes there is so much focus on just the resolution and just the positivity and just the step forward that we skip the step of acknowledging the event, the feeling, the emotion that was there in the first place. And for me, this is a really pivotal part of the equation. So that pendulum swing for me, where that comes into is giving someone space and holding them and supporting them in processes that help them really deeply feel what they went through or what they've experienced or what is going on in their bodies in a safe way, so that it can be real and it can be validated and acknowledged. Because if we don't have something that is validated and acknowledged, then for me, it's almost not real, right? Like we have to have something to work with. And so give that space, give that that capsule and that support to feel that. And then we can ask the client, like, are you now ready and willing to move forwards? Do you feel like you've been heard? Do you feel like you've been acknowledged? And now are you ready and willing to take that step forward, which is then when we move into that other side of the pendulum swing. In terms of like GNM, GHK, I'm just trying to put context to how that actually, I mean, that's a personal thing for me and how I work. How that would translate in GNM, GHK is definitely acknowledgement of the event, which is important in the resolution process. And then I guess the lightness and flow and ease of the dissipation of symptoms that comes from the processing of that deep pain or that experience. So that would probably be how it flows in. And what I might even do at this point in time is just give a little bit of a spiel on
give a little context.
GNM,
I'm like, here I am just eager to go right into the juice.
Yeah.
And
right.
I would love to chat more about GNM, and for anyone listening, give them an insight into it, because when I first heard about it, it blew my mind and it just rang so true. It clicked with everything that I had been learning up to that date, but feeling kind of like I was going in roundabout circles, trying to grasp and understand it. And then here was this organized, comprehensive body of work that just explained,
yes,
oh, wow, this is like a map, the most comprehensive map of the mind-body connection, so that we can understand why the body does what it does and also how to heal. So yes, please go.
Yeah, amazing. And thank you so much for sharing that, because like one of the questions I asked you before we went into this was like, I'd love to know how you came across it, but more importantly, the feeling you got when you found the information, because for me, that was a really profound experience. It was quite a visceral experience. And it was like the smallest seed that got planted with me on German New Medicine. And I kind of like just took it and ran, because the moment that seed was planted, it was like this 2-minute conversation about what it was. But I felt, the way I describe it is like, I felt like I had come home. It was like coming home. And I felt like someone had finally put a language and, like you said, a real structure to everything that I had known in some way of the word for a lifetime, but never had the right language for or been able to explain. And German New Medicine, Germanic healing knowledge, just put, like you said, this framework and this structure to it that made so much sense. And I'm also someone who has a very deeply like spiritual, energetic side to me, but also I have this like real logical brain that wants to know why and how and show me and prove me. And so GNM really satisfied that, because this chart that you can see behind me here is actually the scientific chart of the biological laws of German medicine, and it's got every organ program
That is
on
not
here.
a chill chart.
It's not a
That
chill
is,
chart. It's pretty
that's
intense.
detailed.
Yeah. So this has got like all of the biological programs on it and the way that each organ responds to a biological program. So we'll bring it back because I know that we've probably got like a wide range of people that might end up viewing this. And I'd love for you guys to, like, we've got the intro to breathwork, and as an intro to GNM, like, what the heck is it, right?
Yeah.
So
lay it down, Nellie.
All right. So Germany medicine, you may also hear it called Germanic healing knowledge, or the traditional name is Germanische Heilkunde. And we're learning more and more that this name is actually quite important to Dr. Hamer, who is the man who discovered and documented it. And that's because the Germanische way of life really embodied what he was trying to purvey through his work, which is a real brotherhood. It's about community and brotherhood. And Heilkunde is really like the art of healing. And so this is so science-based, right? Like, you can see this behind me, and it's so based in embryology, but there is this art to it. There's this depth to it. And there is this deep brotherhood and community element to it as well. So Germanische Heilkunde is the traditional name. That translates to Germanic healing knowledge in English. And then the abbreviated version of that has become German new medicine. And so what it is a really, really thorough, comprehensive body of work that's been documented, like I said, by a man called Dr. Hamer. And Dr. Hamer was a cancer specialist. He was head internist of cancer at a cancer clinic. And his son, Dirk, was actually accidentally shot in the head and killed. And this kind of went like Dirk's... like, he didn't die straight away. So it went on for quite some time. And so Dr. Hamer was there by his bedside for all this time. And then when Dirk finally passed, shortly after, Dr. Hamer discovered he had testicular cancer, and his wife actually showed up with ovarian cancer. And Dr. Hamer just had this really deep feeling that the two incidences were connected somehow. And so he obviously had access to a lot of cancer patients, and he went through all of his clients and all of his files and found that in 100% of cases, there was a similar traumatic, shocking event that preceded the showing up of the cancer. And so he really went down a pathway to explore that and understand like how that might come to be. And what eventuated was the documentation of Germanic healing knowledge and what we call the 5 biological laws. So the guts of this, in a nutshell, GNM GHK shows us that every symptom we experience in the body, and that covers the mental health challenges as well as physical symptoms. There are some exceptions like poisoning and accidents and extreme malnutrition and things like this. But in general, every symptom known to us originates from an event, a shock event, a trauma event. And when I say trauma, it doesn't necessarily have to be something massive, but it's an event that catches us off guard and that our psyche doesn't feel, our body mind system, or that it doesn't feel we have the resources to deal with in that moment. And so what the psyche does is it engages an organ that is going to help us make it through that unexpected event. So if we give an example there, something like lung cancer, we see as an adaptation of lung cells, there is an addition and a proliferation of lung cells because the individual has experienced a death fright conflict. So the individual has experienced a moment where they perceived, or the psyche perceived, that they were at risk of dying. And breath, as we know, has a lot to do with life, right? And so it engages the lungs to make more tissue to better take in and process more oxygen so that the individual can survive the event. Now, you've got to think that these run on really primal blueprint programs, right? So the experiences that we have today are often far more figurative than they might have been back in the day where, say, we got chased by a saber-toothed tiger. And that could be a death fright. So the lungs start proliferating tissue. It's like, shit, I've got to take in more air and more oxygen. I've got to help this person survive. Now it's like it could be a fright where, somebody receives a death threat email, say, that could set off a DHS, which is the Dirk-Hammer syndrome, and then the adaptation begins. So it is essentially this complete like paradigm shift in terms of how we view our biology and how we view the body-mind system. And where this starts to come into breath work is that, from my perspective, with breath work, there's a number of things we can do, right? We can use breath work to better understand our experiences and our perception, because our perception plays a massive role here, right? It's not just the event, it's also our unique individual perception of the event. So person A is going to perceive a situation differently to person B. And that's where our real empowerment and power holds, because we can change our perception at any given moment. And so breath work, for me, has the capacity to understand ourselves better, raise our self-awareness, look at changing perceptions, look at the way that we experienced events, work on resolution of events. There is like this huge tie-in. And so I guess like I'll leave it there for now in terms of what GNM is, but I'd love to hear. So I've definitely got some experiences myself, but I'd also love to hear from you where you can see that in play in the experiences that you've had facilitating, and maybe even your own experiences with breathwork. Where can you see those principles like coming into play, and how also it could be really beneficial for people to look at integrating these two tools?
Yeah. Okay. So a couple of things that I want to speak on first, following up from what you said. One of them is, following what you mentioned there about perception, just one of the definitions that I really resonate with of trauma is to view trauma as not what happens to us, but it is a response to what happens to us. And like you were saying, it's not always a big T trauma. Sometimes it is the little T traumas. There's things that happen that maybe to someone else, it's not perceived as traumatic, but the body-mind system for that individual in that particular moment in time recognizes it as traumatic, recognizes it as a threat to safety and survival. And like you were saying, it could be that it's not the tiger, but it's the death threat email. It could be that it's not getting rejected and cast out of the tribe, but it is feeling judged and ridiculed and embarrassed or humiliated about a certain aspect of yourself, and feeling like it's not okay to be in the body that you're in. Yeah. And so we've all got our own versions of unsettling, stress-inducing events that the body-mind system, and when we say body-mind, right, it's pretty self-explanatory. This is that recognition that the body and the mind are connected and operate as a unified system. And so just, I think with what Nellie's sharing here, it's again, like when I first heard it, it was full light bulb moment. Okay, this is making sense, that the body is responding to support us. And I see so often, people speaking badly about their body shutting down or letting them down or failing, these types of words that get tossed around. But actually the body is so intelligent that it's adapting and responding to everything that's occurring, which leads me to the second point that I want to share, which is a diagnosis or a symptom manifesting is not the end of the story. There is a process that wants to happen following that adaptation. So I wonder if you want to talk a little bit about that with what you see. If we were to allow the body to do its thing, what's possible?
Yeah. Okay. So this is definitely something I love to speak to. Sweet. So talking about if we allow that process to unfold, and this is definitely something that I love to speak on, because this is where we see so there's five biological laws in German medicine, and the fifth biological law is what we call the quintessence. And the quintessence is effectively speaking to the divine timing and order in all things. So what we see is that every biological program, which is effectively what results in symptoms, has a purpose, like we've just spoken on. So the body is adapting to help us survive, and the symptoms are part of that process. It's usually either the breaking down or the rebuilding of cells that were broken down or added to help us in the beginning. where this moves into like a whole different gear is, for me, the quintessence is also about what happens if we follow the path of our symptoms and work to resolve them. What happens to us as individuals? And so what I have experienced both firsthand and witnessed in clients is that if this is done with a certain level of awareness, we not only see the shift in physical symptoms, but I witness a profound development and evolution of the individual and transformation. So basically, I believe that our symptoms are pathways to understanding ourselves better, to understanding our experience better, and to completely transforming and evolving ourselves as beings, both physically, but also on a spiritual, if you will, level, or just on a personal evolutionary level. It's incredibly profound. Like, I really believe, and Dr. Harmer didn't necessarily document this side of it, but the more I learn about him, the more I get the sense that he knew that this was a part of it, but he was also hell-bent on getting this information through the mainstream system. And so he kept his documentation very scientific, very particular, very factual. But there is a deep resonance with this, and I can see it and sense it in his teachings the more I learn about him as a man and a person. And definitely I've witnessed it myself. And so again, that's where breath work can come in and be such a beautiful part of that process as well. So yeah, that's my answer to that one.
Cool. And then the other piece of it that I want to bring in is the, to bridge together the emotional experience, the events that occur, the thoughts that we have, the response that we have as a whole to what is occurring. And then that leads into what Dr. Harmer discovered with the brain scans.
Mm-hmm.
And just I want to link this in because I think by now, most people who have done a little bit of research, listened to some podcasts about trauma, will know that stress does impact our physiology in all sorts of ways. And if we are experiencing trauma, it can lead to more complex symptoms, clusters of symptoms. And so what is the brain scan thing? Tell us about that, because I think that's absolutely fascinating and so validating.
Yeah, definitely validating. And I'll just go like back a step as well, because there was something else you said there. So what I want to differentiate between is like a biological program in German medicine view is set off by a very particular specific event, and it follows a very specific pattern. Whereas, yes, absolutely, I definitely agree and resonate that trauma and stress can have an impact on the body and mind, the body-mind system, but in a different way. So I think that prolonged stress changes things, whereas the moment of what we call the DHS, the Dirk-Harmer syndrome, that moment of impact sets off a very specific program. So just differentiating between the two there, and what we see, therefore, on a brain scan when this happens. So when somebody experiences this very specific event, it impacts all three levels of the being. So the brain, the psyche, the brain, and the organ. And so the psyche is the part that perceives the event in a certain way, and it sort of is the, I guess, like overarching director of what's going to happen in the program. The way that the person perceives the event dictates where in the brain is impacted. And what we will see on a CT scan is what we call a Harmer herd. And it's like a set of concentric rings, like a target or a bullseye. And this literally, so Dr. Harmer maps the whole brain as well. So this shape will show up on a CT scan in the part of the brain that the psyche determines is required in the biological program. And that site links directly to the control of the organ that is needed within that biological program to adapt and help the person survive as well. So we will literally see these markings, and it means that from a CT scan, from a like a German New Medicine advanced reader who can read CT scans, which I can't personally yet, but it's definitely on the mission list, they will be able to tell from a CT scan exactly what is going on in the body. They will be able to tell someone what adaptations are occurring in the body. So if someone has, even without knowing their history, a GNM CT scan reader will be able to see these markings on the part of the brain that correlates to the lungs. If someone's experienced a death-threat conflict, and they would be able to say, you have adaptations in the lungs. And then, that would be checked and like, oh, lo and behold, we have adaptations in the lungs. So this is the verification part of GNM, which, is just like pretty out there, right? Like if this is provable, that's a big deal.
And then that can be a guide to inform exactly where to get to work to resolve some of the symptoms that are arising. And I just want to touch on the fact that you don't need the CT scan to be able to work with a German new medicine practitioner who can help you connect the dots.
Yes. Yeah. So CT scan is the ultimate, like in an ideal world, we would have that. But there is also, a process and pathway we can follow to determine the context of the event and the way that the person has perceived the event. So, there's all these different themes. So like I said, for the lungs, we're looking at a death-threat conflict. Mm-hmm. For the musculoskeletal system, the trophic function of the muscles, it's a self-devaluation conflict. So for example, if someone is showing up with chronic back pain and it's showing up as part of the musculoskeletal system, then I know that they've experienced a self-devaluation conflict somewhere in their experience. And we can follow that.
Does that differ
timeline.
by location in the back?
It does.
Or
okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. So each part of the body has a different sub-theme of self-devaluation. And this is probably, I would say, self-devaluation is like one of the most common biological programs running today. And there's several reasons for that. But I also, if you want to go down a bit of a rabbit hole, I believe that we're encouraged societally to experience self-devaluation, right? Like there is so much context out there that is like comparison, and you need to keep getting better and pushing and like all these different things. And so it's one of the most common programs that I see. And it's one of the most common ones that I see impacted by breathwork as well.
Absolutely. And I was going to just say that it's one of the most common things that we see with our clients is, I mean, who doesn't have some sort of back pain these days?
Yeah.
Even if it is temporary, I can't even count how many people I have heard come in being like, my neck's out or my lower back's playing up or it's been happening for years. And breath work can help so much. It can be an absolute game changer for it.
Yeah. And there's two sides even to that conversation, right? Because what I have observed is that we can absolutely have people come to us with symptoms, and we can see that the biological program behind those symptoms can be resolved through the processes of breathwork from people coming to their own understanding of things and resolutions of things. So that makes sense to me why we can see the disappearance of symptoms with someone who's going through breathwork. We can also see it the other way around. So I've also seen people come and experience breathwork, and then 2 or 3 days later, or even directly after, going, man, my body is so sore and so tired, and like all my muscles are hurting. And this is because like there's the risk or the tendency to go, oh, like something's happened in the breathwork, or this is not good for me, right? But from a GNM point of view,
I feel worse suddenly, or am I detoxing, or what? Something's been thrown out of whack.
Yeah. But from a GNM perspective, what's happened there is that someone has moved into healing phase. So there's 2 phases to every biological program. The first is conflict active phase, where the problem is live. And then as we start to come into a resolution of that conflict, we experience healing phase, which is often accompanied by pain, swelling, inflammation. Like this is where the body is reversing the adaptations that happen in conflict active phase. So what can happen is that somebody resolves something within a breath work, which I feel like self-devaluation, a resolution of self-devaluation themes. So an increase in self-value and self-worth is something that can definitely happen through a breathwork experience. And then we go into the healing phase, and all of a sudden we have a body that's sore and tired and all the classic symptoms of healing phase. So this is one of the reasons I think it's so brilliant to have this knowledge, because we can guide ourselves or the people we're working with through an understanding of like there's this hasn't produced something wrong. Nothing's gone wrong. Nothing's like happened here. You've moved into healing phase. So yeah, that like the two sides of that I think are really important to understand. And from my perspective, like GNM GHK is just this incredible body of knowledge that really can underpin and is so, so valuable for so many different holistic modalities and practitioners to know, because it really gives that like foundational pathway. And it also has a lot of, there's also a lot of safety points in knowing it as well. And in terms of like prepping a client for what they might experience, and also knowing there are some biological programs that we don't want to resolve, or we need to be careful around resolving because they involve things like the heart. So yeah.
Do you have any examples of things like that where if there's something going on, you would suggest working with someone who has specialized experience or working gentler over a longer period of time?
Yeah. And I love that you and Lucas speak so much to like too fast, too much, too fast, too soon, and being really careful of that, because it is something we definitely need to be careful with. So if someone is showing up with like really long withstanding or intense symptoms, we're going to be much more in their better interest to just chip away at that rather than going all in, right? Because we don't want to create too much change too fast. It's probably going to be really uncomfortable for these people. Definitely things involving the heart. So like heart flutters and even some forms of anxiety and different things there. We need to be really careful when we're working with heart programs, because it's the heart attack that happens in the healing crisis of the healing phase, the epicrisis. So yeah, it's like really important to know this stuff, right? And to work gently with people, and titration, as you guys speak to, is really important. Yeah, so definitely heart stuff. There's also pancreas. So any form of diabetes needs to be worked with real care.
Okay. And so what I'm taking from this, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you work with a practitioner, for example, who is trauma informed, someone who has an understanding of German new medicine and is able to titrate or kind of pace these sessions for you in a way that is manageable and feels really digestible for you, when that healing phase starts to kick in, the symptoms that may arise are going to be more gentle or manageable.
Yes. Yeah. To some extent.
Rather than extreme and kind of flooding the system.
Correct. Yeah. So what we're looking to do is downgrade like if somebody has long withstanding conflict and issues, we want to downgrade the conflict bit by bit, as opposed to going from 0 to hero. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the longer a conflict runs for and the more intense it was, the longer and more intense the healing phase symptoms are going to be. So we do need to be really careful when we're working with people with like really deep withstanding traumas that have the potential to be linked to a biological program. We need to titrate. We need to chip away. We need to work with what their psyche feels safe working with. And I do believe that the psyche has a safety net as well. Like we will see people like, and I'd love to hear your experience on this as well, but like people where you'll get to a certain point with them, and then they'll be like, that's it, I'm bailing out, I can't do anymore, I'm done.
Or they'll fall asleep. The body knows.
The body knows, right? It's a really smart system. It's like, okay, that's enough for now. So
absolutely, I've seen this so many times, and sometimes for clients who have really big expectations about what a breathwork session should look like. Maybe they've heard from their friend that it was mind-blowing and so profound and like a psychedelic journey or something, or they had a huge amount of emotions release and it was like the biggest breakthrough they've ever had, and they hear it and they're like, okay, that the bar's set pretty high. And then they come into their session and they feel like they've fallen asleep. But what I've witnessed is that their body has been releasing emotions. For example, I have had countless clients who have been crying throughout the session, and then when they complete, they have no idea that they even cried. They feel like nothing happened. And I'm just there witnessing it, and they've been breathing the whole time. They've been engaged. But just like you were saying, the body-mind system has these sophisticated ways of being able to kind of compartmentalize and be like, all right, get out of the way. We need to do this part over here. And respecting the priorities of the body mind system first and foremost over our own mind's priorities is everything that we teach and lead with in our method and Awaken Breathwork, because we can go into a session like guns blazing, being like, I am ready to change my life. And I used to do this. I would go to a healing session or a whatever new workshop and be like, this is the one. All of my symptoms, all of these things that I've had going on, I'm going to heal it today. And I would pray, I'd be so invested, and my expectations would then be shattered when I would experience some progress, but it would be like 5% or 10%, not knowing that my body was organizing it all in a way that was for me, like long term, for the highest good.
Yeah.
Their quintessence principle, you know. But the mind can really struggle with that. And I think especially I have so much compassion for anyone who has a chronic condition and has been trying a lot of things and spent thousands of dollars and so much time and doing different cleanses and research and working with doctors and getting all sorts of tests to then feel like progress is slow. Like, I get it, you want to heal ASAP. But I think that this approach and intimate sense of trust with what's occurring can also, it's kind of ironic, right? That accepting the process actually aids the process. It's the things that we resist that persist. And I think that's just another little bit that I would love to throw in here is the more agitation we are generating towards our body in our healing, and the more agitation we have about our spiritual growth, or like, I'm not getting it fast enough, the more we hold these unhealthy patterns in place and kind of add layers on top of it that further complicate it. And I think the sooner that you can get out of the way and be like, okay, this is the cards I've been dealt, here I am, I better start loving what is, the sooner and easier the body can actually get on with doing what it's been trying to do all along. And it requires courage. You and I have had a lot of conversations about this. Not everyone is ready for this approach. And we've both said that we get it. Like, you have to be pretty all in on board for this approach to work, because if you're still half out in fear, questioning things, what can happen from your perspective, just so people kind of understand that. Like, why is it important to be all in believing and investing?
Yeah, so I wholeheartedly agree and resonate with everything you've just shared there. And we know in GNM that fear is one of the elements that exacerbates any program. Like, it makes everything worse, because again, you come back to understanding this is our primal biological blueprint. Like, we are primal animals in a sense, right? There's a lot more to us, but we're also, we're made of that essence. And so fear is in a state of survival. So the body is going to exacerbate whatever it's doing to help you survive more. So fear is like the number one thing that we need to step out of when we're looking at sort of entering into this world. And in terms of like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, it's definitely like a wholehearted commitment. And it's an interesting one, because like I know that not everyone is just going to be like all in straight away. But there needs to be the thing with German new medicine is you don't actually even need a level of conviction for it to work from our perspective, because it's just what is at play in the body as a natural program, right? But it's not going to be helpful if you're 1 foot in, 1 foot out in terms of some other treatments that may come into play. There can be contraindicators there. They can work against what we're trying to work with biological programs. So there needs to be a level of not necessarily conviction, but of trust in the process, in the facilitator that you've chosen, in the information, and most importantly, in your body, in yourself. And just going back to the fear point, one of the things that I would say around fear that I found can really help downgrade that fear is to use a process by which you, and you have to be ready and willing for this, is to go into exploring how your symptoms and how the process has been of benefit, value, learning, and growth for you, and start to come to terms with the fact that the symptoms are your friends and part of the process. And I know this like is such a mind twist, right? I know this is going to be really triggering for some people to hear. I'm like, I don't want my symptoms. Like, this is shit. But if you can come to that place where you're like, okay, I'm committing to downgrading my fear and I'm going to see how this is playing out for me, then that can have a profound shift in experience in how that plays out and the level of the symptoms that you're experiencing. I will also throw in a bit of a personal story here, going back to the like the time frame part of things, right? So there was one particular biological program that I was in what we call a hanging healing for about 2 years. So I had these really chronic symptoms for 2 years. And then the day that I found the missing puzzle piece to this program, they literally wrapped up, like to the day. But the thing is, and I was so frustrated over these 2 years, it wasn't a very nice thing to be experiencing. It did impact several different parts of my life, but also had I resolved this program right at the very beginning at the start of the 2 years, there is no way I would be where and who I am today. The process that I went on to resolve this, and this was in relationship to a sexual conflict from when I was quite young. Had I resolved that, had I found that missing piece right at the very beginning and resolved the biological program and seen the wrap up of my symptoms, I wouldn't have explored everything that I did within that 2 years, which effectively brought me to this place of like, I feel completely neutral about my experience now. And I see it as just a necessary part of my experience. I see the beauty in it even. Like, can you imagine sitting here and saying, I see the beauty and the divine timing and order in a sexual experience that I had when I was 6? And I would not be able to say that had I not gone through those 2 years of processing. I needed every chunk and every bit of that along the way to come to that final puzzle piece to see the wrap up of the symptoms. And yeah, I wouldn't be in the same place if I didn't have that journey. And so this again comes back to that quintessence, that divine timing and order, and the psyche knows. And I just believe there is so much truth and like on another level, like there are things that are guiding us on another level through these journeys. Our symptoms are the pathway, but they will take as long as they need to wrap up, to bring us to who and where and how we need to be.
Okay, so I know that we're probably heading toward the wrap up of our conversation, but one thing that I do want to clarify for the listener, and then I'll add a couple of more of my little nuggets in here before we wrap up, is how would you define a hanging healing? Because I think I've experienced my own versions of these, and I'm sure a lot of other people who are relentlessly seeking different holistic modalities and trying all of the things can relate to this, where what gets us into this discovery mode where we do all the things and we overhaul our entire life is that there is a bit of a hanging healing going on. So what is that?
Yeah. So effectively a hanging healing is when we have found a partial resolution. There has been a partial resolution to the original conflict. So something has shifted. So for me, for example, the start of the process that I just described was moving into our own home, set off a partial resolution. But then there were all these other pieces along the way that I had to put together and I had to close to come to full resolution. So hanging healing is when that process is started. We've moved into healing phase. There's been a partial resolution to the event, the experience, but we haven't resolved all of it. So there's often like these threads and tangents of the experience. So it's not just like one thing, but there's different elements to it. And that is what I believe is this pathway that I'm talking about, where we need to kind of extrapolate all these different threads and look at them all in order to fully close a program. Some programs just close completely through a change in life or a change in perception, it'll be like done and dusted. But often with the more complex issues, we see that there's these threads. And so it's important, like this comes back to a really deep level of self-awareness and radical self-responsibility, right? In terms of understanding ourselves and understanding our experience and understanding how we perceive things and then pulling them out. I would also say sometimes, though, that sometimes the antidote is, this is going to sound like so contradictory to everything we've just spoken about, but sometimes the antidote is actually not doing the work. Sometimes the antidote is just living and getting back into life.
I've seen this, yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. And actually letting go of all we think we have to do to resolve something. And it's about getting back into life and just trusting that process, and maybe lightly, gently doing some pieces of work on the side, or just like letting things gently integrate. But it's not necessarily about like, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to have this really big breathwork session, and then I'm going to do this. And this like ever searching, seeking is sometimes keeping the program live and keeping us in a state of self-devaluation, because it's like, I'm not enough. I need to do more, and I need to explore more. So sometimes
that's huge. Yeah.
Sometimes
Just acknowledging to like really want to put a little circle and a highlight on that and point to the fact that we need to look at where our behaviors are coming from.
Yes.
And even our wellness practices and our beautiful morning routines and the things that we're doing that we think are so great and #healthy can be coming from fear.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really about intention. Absolutely. And where this is coming from. And if you're approaching it with like a gentle, loving, compassionate curiosity from a place of like, I deeply love myself and I know that there's more to this, and I'm just going to keep gently exploring, as opposed to I'm broken, I need to fix myself, I need to do more to resolve this. Like that's a completely different energy. And yeah, sometimes it really is about just being gentle and living, getting back into the joy of life and letting things unfold in their natural time as well. And that's kind of what ended up happening with me in terms of this program too. Like I was doing bits of work along the way, but I did reach a point where I was like, this is going to wrap up when it wraps up. And then it was like one message with a person that I hadn't really even planned on. I wasn't consciously going out to work on this. It was a message that I sent to someone because I felt ready to send that message, because I'd had a session with my psychologist and it just felt right to send this message. And that changed everything. That was the missing piece. But it wasn't something I was like really pushing for and seeking. It was something that just kind of naturally like wove into the puzzle right at the end there. And then boom, gone, done. Never seen a skerrick of the symptoms since.
Wow. That's incredible. I think that's one of the things that I love most about breathwork is that when we go into a non-ordinary state of consciousness, it's less about what we think we need, and we can set intentions, and we do. You know, we all guide our clients to set an intention for the session, and it's all welcome to bring something really specific into the space. But at the end of the day, if it's not the body mind's priority, it's not going to be the central focus. And there's been so many times where I've gone into a breathwork session thinking it was going to be focused on a particular thing, and then suddenly, like a tangent, I'm over here contemplating something completely different that I actually needed in that moment. And I love that way of working now because it feels organic. It feels natural. It feels in harmony with nature's way. And that's what, to me, German new medicine also is. It's like in harmony with nature's way. It's respectful, it's reverent, it's trusting. There is a method to it and a formula, and there is hope. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've taken from understanding it. And I still have so much to learn, but it gives me hope. And I really love that it's not just about going to someone like, you know, you're a practitioner and a teacher yourself, but what I sense from this, what would you call it? A system, body of work is that it's very pro empowerment of the individual. Like you need to learn. If this is your body and it's going through something, then yes, other people can guide the way, like Nellie can guide the way and show you some things and illuminate areas to look. but also you need to learn about your own body. You need to learn about your own mind and heart and what's going on in there. And that requires maybe some time, maybe reading a book, maybe following some resources, going into one of Nellie's courses and doing some journaling and introspection that you might be like, I can't be bothered doing this. Just take care of it for me. And that quintessence, as you were touching on, there is gifts in the work. It might seem frustrating and like, wow, I would really rather just be getting on with living my best life. But how do we know that we know what our best life is really, right? I could never have guessed that I would end up here teaching breath work and doing all of the things that I was doing. When I got into, all the healing and growth stuff, it was because of a personal crisis.
Yeah.
I was so inflamed. I had rashes all over my body. My digestion was terrible. I had chronic fatigue. I had done all the medications. I'd gone on the antibiotics rounds and rounds. Nothing was helping me. I'd done cleansers, juices, raw food for years. And I think it was the hanging healing thing. Certain things would help, and then it would just come back again, or it would just stay at this kind of set point, lingering and lingering and lingering. And who knew that out of that desperation, it would lead to like an ego death identity crisis, being like, who am I and why am I here? And suddenly I discover a whole new way of being.
Yeah.
And it catalyzes more growth than I could have ever imagined. So like you said, it's difficult in the moment to think about being grateful, but the dots do connect. And when you look back, it does make sense. You will feel that gratitude and recognize that on some level, likely you would choose it again. And I just pray for anybody who's going through something difficult, whether it's physical symptoms, a diagnosis of some kind, or even just emotional pain that you don't know how to shake, that you know that there is a way through that. And I can say the same thing as you. I've really connected with you. I remember since we met on the same thing, that I've had things happen to me when I was young that in my mind were unforgivable. And I couldn't even fathom how I could let it go. It felt like it was fixed in place as a burden that would just be with me for life. And it was through breath work that I was able to connect to the most sincere, like, whoa, epiphany. I get it. I get why this had to happen. And in that moment, like I was describing with the coin, I shifted from resentment, feeling like a victim, feeling like all of this was happening to me, to complete grace and like connection to the cosmic joke almost, going, of course this had to happen. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And of course you chose this for me in my life. And thank you. Thank you. So that's my prayer for everyone. There's so much to learn. And where would you suggest, I'm curious, for those, I mean, I can make suggestions for breath work, but where would you suggest people start with learning about German new medicine and the link here between the system and breath work?
Yeah. So I would actually say that the very first piece of this is embodying and really being willing to take on a high level of self-awareness and self-responsibility, right? And I feel like we could have a whole nother conversation on self-responsibility and how that plays into breathwork and GNM. But it starts there. It starts with really going, I'm not handing my body over to anyone else anymore. And I am willing to step up and take radical self-responsibility for my own body and mind. And I'm going to get to know it as well as I possibly can. Notice how you respond to things. Notice when symptoms come up and when they go away, when they get worse, when they get better. Start to really observe your own life and your interactions with life and your perception on life. That is actually where I'd recommend starting. And then in terms of, if you're already there, awesome. And then in terms of like the more practical sense of German new medicine. So obviously I've got my offerings as well. I've got the GNM Foundations course, which is open to the everyday person to come in and learn GNM in a really digestible way and a way that can be translated into everyday life. There's also some fantastic websites. The Learning GNM website is an amazing resource. Dr. Harmer's book and chart is phenomenal, but it is quite technically thick, and unfortunately it's out of print at the moment. But I'll put some links below. And then there's a couple of different, there's like, it's actually really stepped up in the last couple of years. So even if you Google German New Medicine, Germanic healing knowledge, that sort of thing, there's a lot of resources starting to come online. I also used to help run a not-for-profit called GHK Global, which has some amazing resources, and you can have a look through a different bundle of practitioners there as well and see who you resonate with. But there's some places
there's some good articles on there, isn't there, as well?
Yeah.
I think it's useful for people if they've got specific things going on to have a little look about what it says.
Yeah. There's also a book called The Ultimate Conspiracy, a biomedical paradigm, I think it's called, by James McCluskey. I think it is. I could have that wrong, so I'll put the recommendation in the notes below. Okay. But that was actually the first book that I read that spoke to GNM. It's not super technical, but it's I guess like a conversational book around GNM. But yeah, I'll put some notes below, and absolutely feel free to reach out and contact me, obviously, if you've got any questions or want to explore my offerings. And
and you are just such a gift. I mean, the fact that you are able to integrate breathwork with German New Medicine is on a different level. Like the level of care that you can provide for people and the guidance is priceless, and we need more of that in this world. So I'm so grateful that you exist. And I think following what you're saying, you know, my little nugget there to close out for everyone listening would be to notice in your day-to-day life your response to what is occurring, really making that a practice. And along with connecting the dots with what's happening with your body, the symptoms and things that may be showing up, and what's occurring around that, I think it's just noticing when you're going through certain events, like let's say dishes are left in the sink, or you get a call with some bad news, or you are out and about and someone comments on something that makes you feel really self-conscious, or whatever it may be, noticing how you're responding to the events of life, and turn to your practices, whether it's breath work, whether it's meditation. You know, we have Awaken Daily, which is a free practice you can access online. Yeah. And I think when you notice yourself in a state of stress or feeling a bit dysregulated, as we would call it, turn to your practice and find neutrality if it's available. Allow whatever is processing through to process through sooner rather than later. Because I think so many of us are, you know, we're busy, and we're believing that we're busy, and therefore we're believing that we don't have time to actually be with our feelings, not knowing that a lot of it is accumulating and it's impacting our overall health. And I know that you've touched on, you know, there are like specific notable conflict shocks that can lead to more serious conditions, but also for those of us who may be navigating either hanging healings or having symptoms that go away and then pop up again and go away and pop up again. And we're kind of in this loop of behavior, and we don't realize that we're actually addicted to a way of being.
This is tracks and triggers too. I'll just throw in there. There's a whole nother piece.
Yes, okay, there we go, the lingo. Tracks and triggers in German New Medicine. So recognizing that within yourself, knowing that there's something that you can do about that to start to rewire, you know, your brain and body, your ways of being. And the more time that you can spend in a state of embracing what is in your life, the more available your body can be to heal.
Yeah.
Right. That parasympathetic, 100%. Baby.
Yeah, definitely.
More rest, more bliss, more healing, more health.
Definitely. Amazing. And you've mentioned the Awaken Daily there, Helle, but is there anywhere else that you would recommend that the community starts with breathwork if they're not familiar with it? Or is that just
I think a really great place to start, depending on how deep you want to go. One, if you want to experience a variety of different practices and explore techniques that might help with themes like overcoming negative thoughts or manifestation, working with your creativity, like a whole kind of smorgasbord. I would recommend the Awaken Breathwork app. You can get a free 7-day trial. And Lucas and I guide classes in there. So there's all sorts. And then if you want to go deeper into a journey, that's the deep work, what Nellie and I have mainly been sharing about, then we've got online workshops, or you can contact someone like Nellie. Are you offering one-on-one sessions currently?
I just sent through my form to you guys for listed practitioner the other day. I think it was
There
yesterday.
you go. Okay, so I would recommend reaching out to someone like Nellie. I mean, she is the creme de la creme. So if you want to book an online session, you can do that through Zoom.
Yeah. Or any of our amazing students.
Yeah, we have incredible facilitators on our website, awaken.com.
Yeah. And of course, yourself and Lucas as well.
Yeah. We've got the online events. We've got events currently in the States and soon to tour, I'm sure.
Beautiful.
Other spots. Thank you, Nellie. I love you.
Thank you, Helle, and sending out to our global fam. I hope you guys found so much value and benefit in this. Let us know if you'd like us to do a version 2.0, if there's anything in there.
We just scratched the surface, right?
Just scratched the surface. So yeah, let us know how you feel about this. How does it land? And yeah, just hoping and trusting that there's juice in there for you guys to move forwards with, take into your own lives and step up into that level of, really high self-awareness, self-responsibility, which results in my opinion, empowerment and freedom. And that is what I am here to share and teach the world. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me, Helle. Love you, Nellie, so much. So stoked we cross paths, and we'll speak again soon.
Me too. Speak soon.